Best advice you ever received?
A man named Rich told me once in Diamond Bar, I'm in the corner, I'm looking at everybody. Everybody's having dinner and there are these tables. I pull Rich aside. I said, Rich, give me the one best advice. I want one above everything. And he said, look at everybody here. They're all going to read just a few books and learn a few quotes, few titles, few stories to tell from the books they read. And once they make 100, $250,000, they're going to slow down. If you keep out improving these guys consistently, eventually none of these guys will be your competitors. And he was absolutely right. I took self-improvement to a whole different level based on what he told me. It became an obsession. And I noticed, you know what? He was right.
I mean, we got to be excited about the future. We got to do things that make us want to live. You know, it cannot always be about problems every day. I mean, do you want to wake up every morning and everything's just a problem? Well, what inspires you and what makes you excited about the future? There's got to be some things like that.
This is something that I've actually relied on a little bit myself. Whenever I get to a low point where I think, why do I even bother? I just remind myself, this is where most people stop. And this is why they don't win. And this relates to another one, which is a reminder for the gladiators in the arena who feel beat up and scarred with no hope in sight. Building a business is hard. Hard feels shitty. This is what hard feels like. And this is why most people can't do it. But you can.
The good news is that all the answers have been found. Self-made millionaires have been studied exhaustively. They've been analyzed. They've been interviewed by the hundreds of thousands and millions. And what we know is exactly who they are and what they do and how they think and how they tick and the decisions they make and the things that they do and they don't do. And the wonderful thing is this, if you do what other successful people do, you eventually get the same result that they do. Now, some people say, well, I started off without any money and I don't have any money now. Well, join the crowd. Nobody's got any money. Most people are broke up until their 40s and 50s. So if you're broke today, you're just one of the gang. The only question is, do you stay there? And the answer is no. Now, when I started off in this many years ago, I came from very poor beginnings. I did not graduate from high school. I finished in the half of the class that makes the top half possible. When I left school, I dropped out of high school. I could only get laboring jobs. I was told, by the way, if you don't get a good education, you won't do well in life. If you don't get good grades, you won't get a good job. You don't go to college, you won't do well, and so on. And I believed that for a long time until I found there's hundreds of thousands, millions of people who dropped out of high school who went on to become millionaires and billionaires as well. The reason I say that to you, by the way, is don't let it hold you back. Don't let any experience that you've ever had in your life act as a brake on your potential, because there's hundreds of thousands of people who've had it worse than you could ever dream of, who've gone on to accomplish wonderful things. So I worked at laboring jobs for several years. I worked in construction. I worked on farms and ranches. I worked in factories putting nuts on bolts hour after hour. And one day, in a state of frustration, I began asking this question: why is it that some people are more successful than others? Now, in the Bible, there's a line that says, seek and ye shall find, for all who seek findeth. Ask and the door will be open. So I began asking other successful people, what are you doing differently from me? And they told me, and I did it, and I got better results. I got into sales when I could no longer get a laboring job, like many of you. And in sales, I noticed that one of the guys in my company was making 10 times as much as anybody else, and he was selling the same product out of the same office at the same price to the same people under the same conditions, and he was making 10 times as much as anybody else. So I went and asked him, what are you doing differently from me? And he told me, and I did it. Now, what I discovered, which changed my life and which brought us here today, is I discovered the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect, sowing and reaping, action and reaction, is the great universal or iron law of the universe. What it says is that everything happens for a reason, is that there are no causeless effects, is that even if we don't know what is causing the effect, we trace it back. It's the basis of the scientific process, of all medical research, of all marketing, of all business, is if you can define an effect that you want, you can trace it back and find somebody who at one time did not have that effect, and then find out what they did, and then do the same things, and you eventually get the same results.